A's Cast Live continues from the town. Here's Chris Townsend.
Well, now joining us from MLB.com, he does an absolute wonderful job covering our sport, and we always love to bust out his book. Anthony Castrovince joins us as one of the books that we have here in our library in studio with us that we always have around. That I think it's phenomenal for all baseball fans. A Fan's Guide to Baseball Analytics. It just takes you through. It's got a lot of humor to it, but it really explains what these analytics are, why they're important, how they're implemented. And Anthony, I was thinking about it. As we start to change in baseball, this might be something that this book, you can redo this book almost like over and over again because it's such a good book. But as these things change, there's so much you could add to it.
There is. I wrote it to be as evergreen as is humanly possible in our game, which is not very possible. There's always going to be adjustments, and I think like defense, for instance, since the book was completed, like outs above average on our MLB.com's outs above average stat has gotten much better. At the time the book was released, infield outs above average had just come out. We had already had outfield outs above average. Now we have infield as well. I think catcher defense is still a really untapped area that could improve. But generally speaking, I mean, a lot of that book holds up, in that the very basics of what it means to be like league average, better than league average, worse than league average, and then just the parameters of that. I think we've come a really long way in a short time in analytics, and I'm not suggesting that there's not more room to grow. I just named a couple areas of room to grow. Defense is the big one, but I think when it comes to offense and pitching, I mean, I think we're in a pretty good spot in terms of a base level of, this is what we have to work with.
Well, and once again, I'll hold it up for fans. Fans, you can get it online right now, and you'll have it in like 2 days, 3 days. You can get it on Amazon. You can get it all at Barnes & Noble online. You can get it. And the key to reading it is it's a fast read, and you got a little over a month before the season starts. So so I always say it was good for Christmas, but I think right now as we're getting into our baseball juices are flowing. We're getting ready for spring training, as we'll be down in Arizona by February 21st. Pitchers and catchers are reporting on the 15th. For fans, Anthony, I think it's a great read right now to get you into the start of the season.
Yeah, definitely. And I got to tell you, I turn to it myself sometimes still, because even though I wrote the thing, like the appendix in the back, where, that's one of the great values of it is, we hear these numbers, weighted runs created plus, or OPS plus, ERA plus, FIP, WHIP, etc. What is a good WHIP? What is a bad WHIP? And to have those charts in the back and just have that framework, so when you see these stats, like, okay, put this into context for me. I think the book does a good job of that. To toot my own horn, if I may.
Oh no, we always I love bringing it up because people ask all the time.
I appreciate that.
And you know what? People are afraid of analytics because people just, let's face it, you want to go to the ballpark, you want to have a beer, you want to have a sausage, you want to sit there and you want to watch the game, you want to be entertained, you want to get in your car and you want to go home. You want to watch our show. If you're an A's fan, or, we have a lot of Major League Baseball fans in the Bay Area and people outside the Bay Area who watch or listen to this show, but it's entertainment, right? You don't want to think about your job. You don't want to think about your bills. You don't want to think about your issues. And then all of a sudden, you want to make this complicated on me by throwing in all these math equations, because that's what they are. You could see how people go, we need to help people realize, no, this can be incorporated into your entertainment part. This can be fun for you too.
I think the key is, it's called analytics. And I think, what it is information. If you think of it in that way, it's just information, as opposed to analytics somehow seems like a scarier term than information. We all want information. Yeah. I think as fans of any sport or of any entertainment product, I mean, we want information. If we're movie fans, we want to know the next movie coming out, and that's what analytics is information. It's just a different way of presenting information. And that's what I try to get across in the book, is that the basic concepts are the same. We want to look at stats because we want to know who is good, who is bad. We want to know, is my guy, how does he compare to the rest of the league? We used to do that with batting average, and I explain why that's not as effective a tool as it could be. Batting average, ERA, wins, etc. And yeah, these are weird terms to us who grew up with those traditional metrics, but it's the same thing. It's just trying to get information and trying to relate how a player performs relative to the rest of the league.
This is an interesting year. All of them are, but this one really is. It started with actually in December of 2022 when we were down at the winter meetings, and the sport's back, right? Everybody's
Hmm.
back. The sport is officially back. We've moved on from COVID. We're having a full year. We were just down in Arizona for fantasy camp. That was back and going. We're now going to have spring training. We're ready to rock. And you
Yeah.
just think about where the game is. We're having major changes with rules, which is going to
Hmm.
be interesting. Some may work, some may not, but we're seeing change like other sports have. Right now, we have a top heavy sport where you got teams that are spending a lot of money, we're going for it, and you got too many teams that are not. And I'll admit we're one of them.
Hmm.
We're in an interesting time. So when you look at some of the top storylines going into the season as a national columnist, what are you most interested in?
The rule changes are the number one story in MLB, hands down. It's the biggest sea change to the rule book outside of the pandemic year, where we had all those pandemic protocols and whatnot. In the modern era, I would argue you could maybe compare, coming off the year of the pitcher, where they lower the mound and adjust the strike zone. That was a pretty big change as well, and it showed in the statistics. But in terms of something that's going to have long-term staying power and really change uh, just the rhythm of the sport, uh, really return the rhythm of the sport to something it used to be. That's what this does. The pitch timer is a huge and a necessary, I would say, change for the game. So I'm really excited that's coming to the big league level. I've seen it quite a bit in the minor leagues. I actually just saw it over the weekend at a college tournament where they were training the people who are going to be running the boards, the pitch timer consoles, and it's just it really brings baseball back to a rhythm that I think we grew up with. So there's that, and the defensive shift limitations, the bigger bases, et cetera. So all that, just the adjustment to that, and it'll be fascinating to see the effects of each of those changes. That's number one story in MLB. And then from a team competition perspective, you got some loaded teams in the National League, and obviously the Mets have probably dominated the winter more than any other team in terms of just being a talking point. And some of that was something they didn't get done with Carlos Correa, but they did get a lot done. So, can they live up to what is essentially a World Series or bust situations? This is a function of how much money they spent. You got the Padres in, I would suggest, a World Series or bust kind of mode, because that team could look a lot different a year from now if Manny Machado opts out and Snell and Darvish will be free agents. So, they made the huge signing to Xander Bogaerts and get Tatis back from his suspension. And, it'll be fascinating to see if that team can live up to its potential. But, there's all kinds of stories like that. But, those are the ones that jump out to me. I think the top of the National League is I think so much more dynamic than the top of the American League, where I still think it's the Astros league to lose. I still think they're clearly the best team in the league. Whereas in the National League, you got a handful of clubs that could really duke it out.
Just think about this. We are the entertainment business, and sometimes people forget that. And when I was growing up, running was a big part of the game. For God's sakes,
Yeah.
on our desk right here, Ricky Henderson, the all-time stolen base leader, scored more runs than anybody else. My man Jose Canseco, who was the first 40-40 man of all time. We've addressed it on this show going, 40-40 could be back.
Yeah.
And I was asking the question, with the new rules, what's going to be easier, getting the 40 dingers or the 40 stolen bases? You'd immediately would say 40 home runs. Only 4 guys hit 40 or more home runs last year. I'm
Hmm.
just wondering, the stolen base. I mean, we used to have Vince Coleman and Tim Raines and
Yeah.
obviously Ricky Henderson. Are we going to start seeing guys with 30, 40 stolen bases, guys, the true base stealers back up to 70, 80? Do you think we could see that right away?
I don't know about 70, 80. I think what the math, what the data suggests from the minor leagues, if we were to apply the minor leagues, first of all, have a more heightened stolen base environment as it is. So they're working off of a different base than the big league level. But if you apply it the numbers to the big league level and adjust for that, I think you get to like where we were in the early 2000s, which is pretty, that's a big improvement from where we've been in the last 10 plus years, where the stolen base has really gone away. For those who don't know, the pitch timer is married to a limitation on the number of pickoff attempts you can make before you're charged with a balk. You can only make two. If you make a third, you have to get the runner out or you're charged with a balk. So, that inspires some more aggressive leads. And we saw that in the minor leagues. That we saw on average a half stolen base attempt more per game last year than prior to the pitch timer, and we saw a 10% jump in stolen base success rate. If you can apply that to the big leagues, the game looks a lot different because then you have a better pace, and you have more action on the base pass, and that could also work in conjunction with the defensive shift limits. So now maybe you have more base hits than you used to have. Now you have more guys at first base, and they're taking bigger leads, and they steal more bases. And now it's just a more viewable product. When MLB set about to look into what they could do from a rules perspective, they did all kinds of surveys of what do fans want to see, and the number one thing fans want to see is just action and athleticism. They want to see action on the base pads. They want to see athleticism in the field. So you should have that. The defensive shift limits force the middle infielders to be more athletic, as opposed to just being positioned where the ball is going to be hit. They're going to have to get to the ball. And it inspires more base running, does the pitch timer. So I'm excited to see what that could mean long term.
Yeah, two things on that. First, defensively, I remember thinking about the Dodgers not too long ago, where when you shift as much as people started to shift on right hand, we were so used to left-handed batters being shifted. Now we're watching right-handed batters being shifted. Well, because Seager and Turner for the Dodgers had no range, right? So if you shifted everybody over, you're playing more, balls at Turner and Seager are okay. It's going laterally where they're not very good, right? So you protected them, but you wanted their bats in the lineup. How many guys now, and we'll throw Seager because he wasn't very good defensively last year, his first year in Texas. We got to see that as we really got to see him more than ever before. But how many guys that are big bats that we protected with shifts now get exposed defensively?
Yeah, and we do. I mean, we have some big shortstops. We're in an era of big, productive shortstops, and they'll be tested more by this. I think the bigger adjustment is at second base. I think we've seen some teams really try to. I remember when Mike Moustakas played second base, right? So I mean, we've seen some teams take some real gambles there that they were in a good position to take with extreme shifting, and now that's gone away. And you can't play Mike Moustakas at second base anymore. And I think it's I think there's more demands on the second baseman now, because you're not shading your shortstop over to the right hand side against left-handed batters like you otherwise would. So there's more pressure on the second baseman. And it's a tough position to play anyway. The double play, pivot, and all that stuff. So the value of a rangy, athletic second baseman is more pronounced. A guy like Kemp there in Oakland he's a good defender. He had a bad offensive season last year. 2 years ago, he had a really good offensive season. You put that together, it's a really good player. But I think about, maybe teams are more willing to swallow the, difficulty on the offensive side now if it's a guy who can deliver for you with the glove at second base.
If we take a page out of the NFL or the NBA's playbook, and we know that styles make fights, one of the things that's interesting about all these great fights and battles inside the NFL is with different quarterbacks, you have different styles, right? You can have a wide open with Patrick Mahomes. You can have a wide open playbook, and it's just amazing. And then you got a team like the 49ers who are going to pound you. They got a running game, and they got great defense. You have different styles of how to win. Same thing in the NBA. You could be a big three-point team, or you could still, play to your big man down. I mean, there's different ways to play. Baseball, it seemed like all 30 teams are all trying to play the same way. 3 true outcomes, home runs, walks, stolen bases, maybe, just maybe, like when we were growing up and you had like the St. Louis Cardinals where Tommy Herr could have 114 RBIs but only 9 home runs. And you had all these Cardinals running the bases, and different ways to play makes it more exciting that not everybody looks the same. Hopefully we'll see that. Are you looking forward to that and hoping that we will see that? Different ways to win baseball games.
That's a great point. Just a personality to teams. We've seen that in, I think about the Royals in 2014, 2015, back-to-back pennant winners and World Series winners in 2015. They definitely had a personality. They ran the bases like crazy. They put the ball in play. They played really good defense, and they were somewhat of an outlier. I think the Giants, those Giants teams were kind of similar. Really strong in the bullpen, put the ball in play, et cetera. Last year, the Cleveland Guardians got a lot of ink for just putting the ball in play in a time when not many people were doing that. Yeah, making contact. What a concept! And now that skill is more valuable because of the defensive shift restrictions. So I do think you've seen teams starting to look into that a little more, where teams are always going to go towards where the outlier is, or what is kind of going against the grain. And we did get a rut there, I think, for a while, where it was very much home run, walk, strikeout. And I think teams have maybe targeted some guys higher than the others would have, from a contact perspective in recent years. So you'll start to see that come to the big league level. The game got very homogenous, to your point, very power oriented. And now hopefully, we'll see a shift. It won't be every team. I mean, the New York Yankees aren't going to be contact oriented. They're going to be power oriented. They're going to be Aaron Judge oriented. But I think for smaller market or mid market teams in particular, that's a place where you could gain ground on clubs, as if you're good in that department. The Guardians were a perfect example of that last year.
Well, every single day we get the email of all of everything that's going on MLB.com. So we're very fortunate on looking at what all of you guys are doing. But for our fans, love reading you. What do you have coming up, getting us ready for spring training and ready for the start of the season?
Oh man, this is a busy time of year. All kinds of stuff. I mean, for one, we talked about the rules changes. That's kind of been my baby the last year, really, and particularly in this off season, as we just start to just educate fans about what they're going to see. And I'll have an article about the field timing coordinators and what that job entails. That should be up any minute now, actually. I'll have my annual all underrated team, guys who tend to not get the national love, who might be worth a closer inspection. We'll do our annual list of the winter winners, as if that means anything. Usually it's a curse to be at the top of that list, but yeah, the teams who made the most noise this winter. And yeah, just general spring training preview stuff. If you're a fan of a particular team, I mean, we're going to have you covered here. In short order, we're going to have a lot of content pumping out from each camp. So it's an exciting time of year.
Wait, rewind that. Field time coordinator?
It's the field timing coordinator. So the position's actually existed for several years, because we have had, the clock on between innings breaks, mound visits, pitching changes, but it was a pretty low profile job. It wasn't much to it. Now there's a lot to it. Now that's a really important person in the ballpark, because that person has to be on every pitch. And, when the pitcher receives the ball from the catcher, when the pitcher goes into his motion, the clock stops. When they are basically the arbiter of when a play is dead, and now we're counting down the 30 seconds to the next batter. So it's a pretty big spot. They're actually going to be in direct communication with the umpire throughout the game. They're going to have a headset, and if the umpire will have hand signals during innings to them if they need to reset the clock or whatever they need to do. And then between innings, they can check in with each other. So it's kind of, this person is kind of an extension of the umpiring crew in a way. They are not billed as such, but they really are an important. It's a really important job.
Well, and I was asked this question, and I went, well, we're going to have to wait and see. But with all this enforcing time and enforcing new rules, do umpires have more responsibility than ever before?
Oh yeah. I was just talking to a few of them over the weekend about that. That's a really difficult job. It's become even more difficult in an era with crazy velocity and crazy movement, and it's harder than ever to call balls and strikes. I think that we as fans yelling at our screens get spoiled by, this electronic box we have to work with, and probably overlook just how tough that job is. But now you're adding all kinds of new wrinkles to that job. And I think the biggest takeaway when you step back is just it's the same thing for that field timing coordinator. For those 3 hours or whatever the game is, there's no break for the umpire. And I'm not, you know, I'm not saying, pity the poor umpire. They signed up for this, but um, the between innings breaks are pretty much their only chance to catch their breath. But even then, as I mentioned, they'll be checking in with the field timing coordinator. As one umpire told me, the days of kind of chatting it up, the umpire who's in the field kind of chatting it up with the coach. That's going away. There's no more, hey, what'd you have for dinner last night? Where'd you guys come from, etc. It's because they're going to have to be policing the defensive shift limits and making sure the infielders properly positioned on every pitch. The home plate umpire is going to have to be monitoring the clock on every pitch. So, hang with them. It's a much different job in 2023 than it was even in 2022.
No doubt about it. And I always like to bring it up. We talk about your book even when you're not here for all baseball fans. It's a great book to read right before spring training and right during spring training, a fan's guide to baseball analytics, just kind of get you up to date and what you need to know for the season. It's great stuff. We always love having you on the program. We read you on MLB.com. You do a great job. Let's talk soon.
All right, Chris. Thanks for having me, sir.
Anthony Castrovince from MLB.com. He's terrific.